The Thompsons were thrilled to find an antique mirror at a local estate sale. It was tall, ornate, and perfect for their living room. But from the moment they hung it, strange things began to happen. At first it was small, a flicker in the corner of their vision, a shadow that didn't belong. Then, their daughter, Lily, claimed she saw someone in the mirror. "She looks like me," Lily said, "but she's not." One night, as the family watched TV, the mirror's surface rippled. John Thompson dismissed it as a trick of the light, but his wife swore she saw their reflections move when they hadn't. Things escalated when Lily stopped responding to her name. She'd stand in front of the mirror for hours, her lips moving silently. When her mother tried to pull her away, Lily turned and whispered, "She says it's my turn now." The next morning, Lily was gone. Her reflection remained, staring back with a twisted smile. Desperate, the Thompsons smashed the mirror, but all that was left was a black void where the glass had been. Faint laughter echoed from the shards. The mirror was gone, but every window in the house now showed a reflection that didn't match. Deep in the Sahara Desert, a blurry satellite image surfaced online, a massive, black pyramid buried beneath the sand. It wasn't on any map, and official records denied its existence. But conspiracy theorists were certain this was no ordinary structure. A group of explorers set out to find it, live streaming their journey. Days passed with nothing but endless dunes. Then the feed went silent. Hours later, it resumed briefly, showing a massive, obsidian-like pyramid rising from the sand, its surface smooth and impossibly dark. The camera panned shakily as the team entered. Inside, the walls were covered in strange symbols, glowing faintly. The explorers whispered nervously, describing a low hum that seemed to vibrate in their bones. One of them pointed out that their GPS had stopped working. Suddenly, the stream cut to black. No one heard from the team again. Days later, the video vanished from the internet, along with any mention of the pyramid. Those who shared it reported strange knocks at their doors late at night, or their devices mysteriously wiped clean. Some believe the pyramid is an ancient alien structure. Others say it's a government experiment buried in secrecy. But those who look for it often disappear, leaving only one chilling warning behind. Don't go near the Black Pyramid. It doesn't want to be found. In a remote corner of Alaska, hikers often report a strange metal tower rising from the forest. It isn't marked on maps, and no one knows who built it. Locals call it the Signal Tower and warn travelers to stay away. A group of friends on a camping trip decided to investigate after hearing the stories. They found the tower at sunset, its rusted frame stretching high into the sky, topped with a blinking red light. Despite the eerie silence around it, no birds, no wind, they pressed on. At the base of the tower, they discovered strange carvings etched into the metal, spirals, geometric shapes, and symbols they couldn't decipher. One of them climbed the rickety ladder to the top, hoping to get a better view. Halfway up, he froze. "There's something up here," he whispered down. The others saw him stop moving, his head tilted as if listening. Then, without warning, he screamed and fell, landing lifeless at their feet. Panicked, the group tried to leave, but their phones and compasses stopped working. A deep, vibrating hum filled the air, and the blinking light atop the tower began flashing faster. One by one, they started hearing voices, faint at first, then louder. Each voice seemed to come from a loved one, calling for help. Against their will, they found themselves walking back toward the tower. By morning, the forest was empty, save for the tower, its light still blinking steadily. Locals say the tower broadcasts a signal no one can trace, and those who hear it never come back. But the real question remains, who or what is it calling? In the 1980s, a small town called Ashborne vanished overnight. Maps were updated, records erased, and its name forgotten. Only a handful of conspiracy theorists claim it ever existed. Lila, a journalist, stumbled across a cryptic forum thread about Ashborne. It mentioned strange experiments and government cover-ups. Intrigued, she followed the breadcrumbs, old newspaper clippings, abandoned roads leading to nowhere, and whispers of a Project Silent Dawn. Eventually, she found the supposed location. A cracked, overgrown road led to a clearing where the town should have been. Instead, she found crumbling foundations and a single intact sign: "Welcome to Ashburn." As Lila explored, she noticed the air felt heavy and the silence was unnatural. Then she saw them, shadowy figures moving just beyond her vision. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Leave now. Ignoring the warning, she pressed on and found a rusted metal hatch. Inside were files stamped classified. They detailed experiments with sound waves and mass psychological manipulation. A final note read, "Containment failed. Evacuate immediately." Before she could leave, the shadows surrounded her. Her phone camera captured one last image, the Ashborne sign, now pristine, with lights glowing faintly in the distance. Lila never returned, and her notes were wiped from the internet. Those who search for Ashborne claim to hear faint whispers calling them back, but no one who goes looking ever comes home. In 1998, a mysterious TV signal began interrupting late-night broadcasts in small towns across the Midwest. It showed a static-filled screen with a faint figure in the background and a distorted voice repeating, "Do you see me?" At first, it was dismissed as a prank, but the interruptions grew more frequent, always airing at exactly 2:13 a.m. People who watched the broadcast reported strange side effects, headaches, vivid nightmares, and a feeling of being watched. Some claimed the figure in the static was getting closer. One night, David, an insomniac, decided to record the broadcast. He watched as the static shifted, revealing a pale, hollow-eyed figure staring directly at him. The voice whispered, "I see you now." The next morning, David's neighbors found his TV on. The screen cracked. He was gone, with no signs of a struggle except for a single handprint burned into the carpet. After David's disappearance, the broadcast stopped. But conspiracy theorists claim it wasn't random. The towns where it aired have the highest rates of missing persons, and those who watched it still report seeing the figure in their dreams, whispering, "You're next." Some say the phantom broadcast was a failed government experiment in mind control. Others believe it was something far worse, reaching through the static to claim its victims. When the Garcias moved into their new home, they were delighted to discover an extra room not listed on the blueprints. It was small but cozy, tucked behind the laundry room with a single window that overlooked the backyard. Their teenage son, Ben, claimed it as his own space. He filled it with books, posters, and a beanbag chair, spending hours there after school. But soon he began acting strangely, distant, tired, and jumpy. One night, Ben burst into his parents' room, trembling. "The window doesn't look outside anymore," he whispered. Confused, they followed him to the room. Sure enough, the window no longer showed the backyard, but a black void, faintly pulsing as if alive. Over the next few days, the family tried to avoid the room, but its door would always be open, the darkness inside seeming to creep closer. Then they heard Ben talking to someone. When they confronted him, he said, "It's not a someone. It's the room. It says it's hungry." That night, Ben disappeared. They searched the house, calling his name, but all they found was his phone lying in the center of the extra room. By morning, the room was gone, its door replaced by a solid wall. The Garcias swore it had been there, but no one believed them. Years later, the house's new owners reported hearing faint knocks coming from behind the laundry room wall. The Millers stumbled upon the old clock at a dusty antique shop. It was beautiful, hand-carved wood with intricate gears and a faint chime that felt oddly soothing. The shopkeeper warned them, "This clock keeps more than time," but they laughed it off and brought it home. At first, the clock was a charming centerpiece, but soon its ticking grew louder, echoing through the house even when they weren't near it. The hands moved erratically, sometimes stopping altogether, only to start spinning backward. One night, at exactly 3:33 a.m., the chime rang out, louder than ever before. The family woke to find the house freezing cold, the air heavy. Shadows moved unnaturally, stretching and twisting along the walls. Their son Max was the first to notice the figure, a gaunt man in a tattered suit standing near the clock. His hollow eyes locked onto them as he whispered, "Time's up." The family tried to flee, but every door led back to the living room. The clock's hands spun faster and faster, the chime now deafening. One by one, the Millers vanished, their screams swallowed by the sound of grinding gears. By morning, the house was silent. The clock sat pristine, its hands reset to midnight, waiting patiently for its next owner. It started as a rumor on conspiracy forums. A strange radio frequency, dubbed the Black Signal, could be picked up at exactly 3:03 a.m. on shortwave radios. Those who tuned in claimed to hear a distorted voice delivering cryptic messages, coordinates, or chilling warnings like, "They are watching." Jake, a self-proclaimed conspiracy enthusiast, decided to investigate. He dusted off an old radio, set his alarm for 3 a.m., and tuned in. At first, there was only static. Faintly, a voice emerged, crackling and disjointed. "Do not look outside," it said. Jake froze, heart pounding. Against his better judgment, he glanced at the window. A dark figure stood motionless in the yard, its outline barely visible in the moonlight. The next night, curiosity overtook fear. He tuned in again. This time, the voice whispered coordinates, his exact location. "Leave now," it added. By the third night, the voice grew clearer. "They know you're listening," it hissed. The lights in Jake's house flickered and his phone vibrated. A text appeared. "Stop." Terrified, Jake unplugged the radio and smashed it, but the signal didn't stop. His TV flickered on, displaying static, and the voice returned, louder than ever. "You can't run." The next morning, Jake was gone. His house was empty, save for a single unmarked radio sitting on the table, still tuned to the black signal. The forums went silent after that, but some claim the signal still broadcasts, waiting for its next listener. The Thompsons were thrilled to find an antique mirror at a local estate sale. It was tall, ornate, and perfect for their living room. But from the moment they hung it, strange things began to happen. At first it was small, a flicker in the corner of their vision, a shadow that didn't belong. Then, their daughter, Lily, claimed she saw someone in the mirror. "She looks like me," Lily said, "but she's not." One night, as the family watched TV, the mirror's surface rippled. John Thompson dismissed it as a trick of the light, but his wife swore she saw their reflections move when they hadn't. Things escalated when Lily stopped responding to her name. She'd stand in front of the mirror for hours, her lips moving silently. When her mother tried to pull her away, Lily turned and whispered, "She says it's my turn now." The next morning, Lily was gone. Her reflection remained, staring back with a twisted smile. Desperate, the Thompsons smashed the mirror, but all that was left was a black void where the glass had been. Faint laughter echoed from the shards. The mirror was gone, but every window in the house now showed a reflection that didn't match. Flight 717 was a routine red-eye from Chicago to Denver. It was a clear night, and passengers settled in for the short flight. But 45 minutes in, the plane abruptly disappeared from radar. No distress signal, no debris, just gone. The official report blamed a freak electrical malfunction, but conspiracy theorists had other ideas. Some claimed the plane was hijacked by shadowy government forces. Others believed it entered a time slip, or was abducted by something not of this world. Months later, strange reports surfaced. A farmer in Nebraska claimed to see a plane hovering silently in the sky before vanishing. Hikers in Colorado found a field littered with charred airline seats, but no sign of passengers. Then, nearly a year to the day after its disappearance, Flight 717 reappeared. Air traffic controllers in Denver were stunned when the plane landed on an empty runway, its lights flickering. But there was no one on board. The seats were intact, luggage still stowed, and the cockpit was empty. Investigators found only one clue. The plane's black box recorded hours of static, interrupted by a single chilling phrase whispered over and over, "They took us." The plane was quietly dismantled, and officials dismissed the incident as a hoax. But late at night, conspiracy forums buzz with theories. Some say Flight 717 never landed at all, that what returned wasn't the same plane. Others claim to hear faint whispers when passing near the Denver airport, as if the passengers are still calling for help. Evan, an IT technician for a government contractor, stumbled upon a hidden folder labeled Project Arabos while fixing a server glitch. Inside were redacted documents, blurry photos, and one video file. It showed a figure strapped to a chair, screaming, with a voice off camera asking, "Have you seen the eyes?" Suddenly, his computer froze, and a message flashed, "This file is not for you." The next day, his badge stopped working, and coworkers avoided him. That night, Evan received a call from a distorted voice. "Delete everything. They're watching." Evan wiped his computer, but it was too late. Black SUVs parked near his house, and strangers stared at him in public. His accounts were frozen. One night, he found his laptop on with the Project Arabos folder open. A new file titled Evan appeared. He clicked it. It was a live feed of his bedroom. Behind him, the closet door creaked open. The next morning, Evan was gone. His apartment was empty, and his digital footprint erased. Conspiracy theorists say Project Arabos is a secret psychological experiment, but no one who finds the file ever survives. It started with an email. Amanda, a freelance journalist, received a message with no sender, just the subject line. Do you want to know the truth? Curious, she opened it. Inside was a link and a single phrase. The shadow network is real. The link led to a dark website filled with grainy videos, leaked documents, and cryptic symbols. It claimed that a secret organization controlled everything: governments, corporations, even disasters. The deeper Amanda dove, the more unnerving it became. Names of missing people appeared in files, all listed under the ominous term, erased. Soon, strange things started happening. Her phone would light up with unknown numbers that hung up as soon as she answered. She noticed black SUVs parked near her apartment. One night, her laptop turned on by itself, the screen flashing the words, "Stop digging." But Amanda didn't stop. She downloaded files that hinted at experiments in mind control, weather manipulation, and mass surveillance. One document claimed, "The shadow network sees all. Once you've found them, they've already found you." The final straw came when she returned home to find her apartment ransacked. Her laptop and files were gone, but a single note was left on her desk. "You've been warned." Amanda tried to go public, but no one believed her. Her story was buried, her accounts frozen, her life dismantled piece by piece. One day, she vanished entirely. Conspiracy theorists now whisper about the shadow network and warn others. If you look for them, they'll make sure no one ever finds you. In the cluttered attic of her aunt's Victorian home, Sophie uncovered a faded carnival mask, its once vibrant feathers now brittle, and its painted smile cracked. Something about the mask compelled her, and she brought it to her room as a quirky decoration. Little did she know, the mask belonged to a performer named Margot, who disappeared during a masquerade decades ago, leaving behind rumors of a sinister obsession. The moment Sophie hung the mask on her wall, strange things began happening. At night, muffled giggles filled her room, and faint music played as if from a distant ballroom. When Sophie wore the mask on a whim, she experienced fleeting moments of disorientation, her reflection showing someone else's face, a glamorous yet menacing figure. Haunted by these occurrences, Sophie dug into the mask's history, uncovering tales of Margot's untimely demise after a jilted admirer swore she'd never leave the masquerade alive. The mask, cursed by Margot's restless spirit, ensnared anyone who dared claim it. One evening, Sophie awoke to find herself dressed in an old-fashioned gown, the mask fixed to her face. Her reflection now stared back with Margot's mocking smile. Sophie tried to destroy the mask, but it always reappeared, and every morning she found herself more and more like Margot. The final message, scrawled on her bedroom wall in lipstick, sealed her fate. The show must go on. In the dim light of her attic, Clara discovered an old, dust-laden camera, its leather strap cracked with age. Intrigued, she decided to test it out, keen on capturing memories of her quiet home. After a few trial shots, she turned to her reflection in the attic mirror. As she pressed the shutter, a strange sensation prickled her skin. The flash illuminated the corner of the attic, where shadows twisted unsettlingly. Brushing it off as her imagination, she continued snapping pictures, each click echoing in the stillness. Later that evening, Clara developed the photos, her anticipation mounting. But when the images emerged, her heart dropped. In every shot, lurking behind her were figures, pale, twisted shapes that seemed to leer at her. Panic set in as she realized that in the last photograph, one figure was closer, its eyes glinting with malice. That night, she heard a whisper, a raspy voice calling her name, growing louder until it filled her head. The next day, Clara vanished without a trace. The camera remained, the last photograph still hanging in the air, waiting for another unsuspecting soul to discover its sinister secret. While cleaning out the cluttered basement of her family's century-old manor, Clara discovered an antique locket resting inside a cracked jewelry box. Tarnished yet alluring, the locket seemed to call to her. Curious, Clara opened it, revealing the sepia-toned portrait of a young girl with sorrowful eyes. What she didn't know was that the locket once belonged to Isabella, a child who vanished under mysterious circumstances long ago, leaving whispers of betrayal and rage. Clara began wearing the locket, unaware of the curse it carried. Soon, her nights were plagued by vivid dreams of drowning, and the faint sound of sobbing echoed through the halls. Objects moved on their own, and mirrors reflected more than just Clara's image. One evening, she woke to find water pooling around her bed, and Isabella's voice pleading, "Save me." Panicked, Clara sought answers, uncovering a tragic story of jealousy and murder. Isabella's spirit, bound to the locket, sought not just justice but company in her eternal misery. When Clara tried to return the locket to its resting place, she found it tightly clasped around her neck, the clasp broken and immovable. That night, she found a single message etched into her bathroom mirror. "You're mine now." In the heart of a forgotten cemetery, a young boy named Eli stumbled upon a grave overgrown with brambles. The name was barely legible, etched into crumbling stone: Abigail. Intrigued, he knelt down, brushing away dirt, when a soft whisper filled the air. "Help me," it pleaded, sending shivers down his spine. Eli glanced around, but the cemetery was empty, save for the rustling leaves. Compelled, he pressed his ear against the stone. "They won't let me go," the voice lamented, sending his heart racing. Each day after school, Eli returned to the grave, drawn by the whispers that grew more frantic. "Dig. Find me," it urged, as if urging him to uncover long-buried secrets. His friends warned him to stay away, but the allure of the voice consumed his thoughts. One fateful evening, driven by a mixture of dread and curiosity, Eli brought a small shovel. As he dug, the soil felt unnaturally cold. Suddenly, the ground shifted, and Eli's hands brushed against something slick. Panic surged. He unearthed a small, hollow casket. When he opened it, he screamed as a shriveled hand grasped his wrist, pulling him into darkness. The whispers ceased, and the cemetery fell silent, waiting for the next curious soul. In a dusty attic, Sarah found an old porcelain doll, its painted eyes glinting mischievously in the dim light. Intrigued, she took it home, thinking it would make a perfect gift for her younger sister, Lily. That night, as the house settled into silence, Sarah heard a soft voice drifting from the doll. "Help me," it whispered, sending chills down her spine. Dismissing it as her imagination, she fell into a restless sleep, the doll perched ominously on her bedside table. The next day, Sarah noticed oddities. Lily spoke of a new friend who told her secrets about their family, things no one but Sarah had known. As dazed, the whispers grew clearer, revealing truths that spiraled into darkness. The doll shared the tale of a girl named Eliza, who had gone missing decades ago, a girl who had once owned a similar doll. One stormy night, Sarah awoke to find the doll gone. Panic surged as she rushed to Lily's room, only to discover her sister was missing too. In her place was the doll, now with eyes that seemed to glimmer with malicious glee. The last whisper echoed in Sarah's mind, "You'll find her where I once was lost." The attic door creaked open, inviting her into the darkness. Every night, the light in the old hallway flickered, casting long, dancing shadows that twisted across the walls. Clara had grown accustomed to it, dismissing it as a mere electrical fault. But tonight felt different. The air was thicker, charged with an unsettling energy. As she passed the doorway, the light dimmed, and a shape seemed to flicker just at the edge of her vision. She halted, heart racing, peering into the darkness. Nothing moved, yet she felt a presence behind her. She spun around, but the hallway was empty. Shaking off the feeling, Clara returned to her room. The flickering resumed, more insistent now. Each pulse of light revealed the outline of something, tall, slender, and impossibly still. She grabbed her phone, the screen illuminating the room, and cautiously stepped back into the hallway. The light was brighter now, almost blinding, and as it flickered, the shape morphed, growing closer with each pulse. In an instant, the light went out, plunging her into darkness. Clara was frozen, terror gripping her as she felt cold breath on her neck. The moment the light flickered back on, she gasped, realizing she was not alone. There in the glow stood a version of herself, eyes wide with horror, trapped in a silent scream. The old house creaked with age, but it was the whispers that unsettled Mia most. Each night, as she settled into her bed, the soft murmurs drifted down from the attic. At first, she dismissed them as the wind or her imagination, but they grew more distinct, forming a haunting chorus of unintelligible words. Curiosity gnawed at her until, one fateful night, she resolved to investigate. Grabbing a flashlight, she climbed the rickety stairs, the air growing cold and thick with unease. The whispers swirled around her, now sounding like pleas. "Help us," they seemed to beg. Heart pounding, Mia pushed open the attic door. Dust particles danced in the narrow beam of her light, revealing a cramped space filled with forgotten relics and darkness. As she stepped inside, the whispers intensified, surrounding her like a clamoring crowd. Suddenly, her flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into suffocating blackness. Panic surged. She stumbled back towards the door, but it slammed shut, trapping her inside. The whispers transformed into laughter, low, mocking, and hungry. They were no longer pleas, they were promises. As the last light of her sanity dimmed, Mia realized she was not alone. She never would be again. Emily always loved the old mirror in her grandmother's attic, its ornate frame a relic of the past. One stormy night, seeking solace from the thunder, she climbed up to gaze into it. As lightning illuminated the attic, she noticed something strange. Her reflection smiled back at her, even though her own lips were pressed into a thin line of confusion. Heart racing, she blinked, certain it was a trick of the light. But the reflection remained, grinning wider, eyes glinting with malice. Panic surged through her as she stepped back, but the reflection didn't move. Instead, it raised a hand, beckoning her closer. Against her better judgment, Emily leaned in, drawn by an inexplicable force. Suddenly, the glass rippled like water, and without warning, her reflection lunged forward, yanking her into the mirror's depths. Trapped in the cold, dark void, she screamed, but it echoed only within her mind. Outside, the mirror reflected the attic, still and quiet. In the glass, Emily's reflection now wore her face, wearing a satisfied smile. It whispered softly, "Your turn to be me." And in the stillness of the attic, the last flicker of lightning faded, leaving only the reflection watching, waiting. In the forgotten library of her great-uncle's mansion, Emma unearthed an aged, leather-bound journal. Its cover was scarred with claw-like marks, and its pages smelled faintly of soot. The journal seemed blank at first, but as Emma turned the pages, words began to appear in a childlike scrawl, describing the life of a boy named Samuel who vanished under strange circumstances during a fire. Intrigued, Emma kept the journal close, unaware of its ominous power. Each night, more entries surfaced, recounting Samuel's growing fear of the shadow, a sinister figure that tormented him. Emma began hearing faint whispers while reading, and flickering shadows danced across her room's walls, even in complete darkness. One night, she woke to find the journal open on her desk, the words "I see you" freshly inked. Frightened, Emma researched the mansion's history and discovered that Samuel had tried to warn his family of the shadow before he disappeared. Now, the journal served as a beacon, drawing the shadow to its reader. When Emma attempted to destroy the book, she found it untouched on her nightstand the next morning, its final message chilling her to the core. "You're next." The shadow lingered after that, growing closer each night, until Emma's reflection vanished from every mirror. All that remained was a pair of glowing eyes in the darkness. Matt's hotel room was ordinary at first, a bland bed, beige walls, a small TV. But as the night progressed, the layout seemed to shift. The bed moved closer to the door, the wallpaper patterns changed, and the TV displayed static faces that whispered his name. He tried leaving, but the door led back into the room. Panicking, Matt smashed the window only to find another wall behind it. By morning, the room was empty, and the hotel staff swore it had never existed. In a village shrouded by dense woods, whispers of an ancient curse loomed like shadows. Each year, to appease the unseen force that haunted their lands, one villager would vanish, never to be seen again. This year, it was Clara's turn. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the villagers gathered at the old stone altar, their faces pale and eyes full of dread. Clara, trembling but resolute, stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She had volunteered, believing the sacrifice would save her loved ones. As the villagers chanted in hushed tones, Clara felt the cold grip of despair clutching her throat. Suddenly, an eerie howl pierced the night, and the ground trembled beneath her feet. The atmosphere thickened, and she sensed the presence of something sinister. In a panic, she turned to flee. But the villagers, their faces eerily calm, blocked her path. With horror dawning, Clara realized the truth. They weren't here to save her. They were the sacrifice. In an instant, the altar cracked open, revealing a gaping maw of darkness. As she was pulled into the abyss, Clara's screams echoed through the woods, merging with the whispers of the villagers, who smiled knowingly, their offering complete. In the cobwebbed corner of her late grandfather's workshop, Mia discovered an ornate music box, its wood chipped, and the figurine of a ballerina missing an arm. Curious, she wound it up, and a haunting melody filled the air, discordant yet strangely hypnotic. What Mia didn't realize was that the music box once belonged to a girl named Celeste, who died tragically on the night of her final ballet performance. As the days passed, the music box would play on its own, its eerie tune echoing through the house. Mia began to notice fleeting glimpses of a figure in a tattered ballet costume reflected in mirrors and windows. She found herself inexplicably drawn to dance, her movements mirroring routines she'd never learned. One night, Mia awoke to find her feet blistered and bruised as though she'd been performing for hours. Desperate for answers, Mia uncovered an old newspaper clipping. Celeste's life was cut short in a tragic fall after someone sabotaged her performance. The music box, cursed by Celeste's unfulfilled dreams, ensnared those who touched it, forcing them to complete her final dance. Terrified, Mia tried to return the box to the workshop, but it followed her, always reappearing at her bedside. The final time she wound it, the melody grew deafening, and Celeste's figure materialized, whispering, "You'll dance for me forever now." Mia's screams were lost in the swirling music as the world faded into shadow. While exploring the storage room of her new home, Claire uncovered an antique mirror framed in tarnished silver, its surface slightly warped. Fascinated, she hung it in her bedroom, unaware of the stories tied to it. The mirror had once belonged to a recluse named Eliza, who disappeared without a trace, leaving behind whispers of a cursed reflection that consumed her. At first, the mirror seemed ordinary, but soon Claire noticed oddities. Her reflection would linger a moment longer after she moved, or she'd catch glimpses of shadowy figures behind her that vanished when she turned around. Then her reflection began to change, smiling when she wasn't, or moving when she stood still. Terrified, Claire tried to cover the mirror, but the blanket slipped off during the night. One morning, she found the words, "Let me out," scrawled in the condensation on the glass. Researching the mirror's history, she discovered that Eliza had been trapped within it after performing a ritual to see her true self. When Claire attempted to remove the mirror, she realized it was impossible to lift. That night, her reflection spoke, its voice a chilling echo of her own. "Your turn to stay." The next morning, Claire's parents found an empty bedroom. The mirror hung on the wall, its surface now perfectly smooth, and a faint, muffled scream echoed whenever someone stood too close. In the dusty attic of her grandmother's house, Lily stumbled upon an old doll, its porcelain face cracked, yet eerily beautiful. Intrigued, she brought it down to her room, unaware of its dark history. The doll once belonged to a girl named Evelyn, who mysteriously vanished one stormy night, leaving behind whispers of a jealous spirit. As Lily played with the doll, strange occurrences began. Shadows darted across her walls, and chilling whispers echoed in the silence. One night, she awoke to find the doll sitting upright at the end of her bed, its glassy eyes seemingly fixated on her. Heart racing, she tossed it aside. The next day, her friends wouldn't speak to her, their faces twisted in fear. Lily felt the weight of 1,000 stares, empty and cold, settling deep within her. Desperate, she researched the doll, uncovering the truth. Evelyn's spirit had never left, trapped within the porcelain shell, seeking revenge on those who dared disturb her rest. That night, Lily returned the doll to the attic, but it was gone. Instead, she found a note pinned to the wall in Evelyn's childish handwriting. "Now you play with me forever." Ella was walking home late when she noticed someone following her. A man with a wide, unnatural smile. At first, she thought he was harmless, but his grin never faltered, his pace matching hers exactly. When she started running, so did he, yet his expression remained eerily calm. She reached her apartment and locked the door, but the smile was waiting outside her window. The next morning, she was gone, and all that remained was a mirror, cracked and reflecting a grinning face that wasn't hers. In the center of a sleepy village, there was a well said to be cursed. Long ago, it was used to drown those accused of witchcraft. The townsfolk warned against going near it, but Kyle, ever the skeptic, decided to investigate. He lowered a flashlight into the well, peering down. He swore he saw movement, a pale hand reaching up. Before he could react, he was yanked inside. The villagers heard his screams echo through the night. The next day, the well was dry, and Kyle's name was etched into the stone. Every evening, thick fog rolled through the town, but one night it was different. Emma noticed a figure standing motionless outside her window, barely visible through the mist. Thinking it was a trick of the light, she went to bed. But the next night, the figure was closer. On the third night, it stood at her front door, its outline more distinct, a tall man with no face. Emma called the police, but they found nothing. The following morning, Emma's bed was empty, her room filled with an eerie, lingering mist. It appeared overnight, a carnival on the edge of town that no one remembered arriving. Bright lights and haunting music lured in visitors. Amy and her friends decided to explore it, excited by the strange rides and games. But as the night went on, they realized something was wrong. The rides operated without attendants, the food tasted like ash, and the other patrons had hollow, glowing eyes. Amy tried to leave, but every exit led her back to the carousel. Her friends vanished one by one, their laughter replaced by screams. The next day, the carnival was gone, leaving only Amy's shoe in the empty field. Driving home late at night, Paul took a shortcut through a desolate stretch of road. After hours of driving, he realized he hadn't seen any signs or landmarks. The road seemed endless. His gas gauge neared empty, and his phone had no signal. He turned around, but the scenery remained the same. Pitch-black trees and a winding road. Exhausted, he pulled over and fell asleep. When he woke up, he was in his bed, his car keys on the nightstand. But his car was never found, and Paul never took that shortcut again. There's a serene lake deep in the woods that's said to be cursed. The locals warn that anyone who swims in it disappears. Fiona didn't believe the stories and decided to take a dip on a dare. As she swam, the water grew colder, and the surface began to ripple unnaturally. She felt hands grasping her legs, pulling her under. Her friends heard her screams but saw nothing except bubbles rising to the surface. The next morning, the lake was perfectly still, but Fiona's face stared back at them from beneath the water. When Sam moved into his fixer-upper, he noticed odd things. Creaks in the ceiling, missing food, faint footsteps at night. He chalked it up to the house settling, but one evening he found a handwritten note on his nightstand that read, "Thank you for letting me stay." Terrified, Sam searched the attic and found a makeshift bed and discarded wrappers. He moved out the next day, but not before installing a hidden camera. Reviewing the footage, he saw a gaunt figure staring down at him through the attic door, smiling. On a stormy night, Maya's phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. When she answered, a chilling, wavering voice begged for help. The line crackled, and the call ended abruptly. She thought it was a prank until the calls began happening every night at exactly 3 a.m. Each time the voice grew more frantic, crying about being trapped. One night the voice whispered, "I'm in your house." Maya froze. The call wasn't coming from her phone anymore, but from the landline, a landline that had been disconnected for years. The police found the phone shattered, but Maya was never seen again. In the dim light of her grandmother's attic, Sarah discovered an ornate music box, its surface dust-coated and forgotten. She felt an irresistible urge to wind it up. As the delicate mechanism clicked, a haunting melody filled the air, echoing through the empty house. An eerie chill swept over her, and shadows danced along the walls. The music played on, growing louder, wrapping around her like a shroud. As the last notes faded, Sarah thought she heard a whisper, soft and sorrowful. "Help me." Heart racing, she searched the attic for the source. It was then she noticed a faded portrait of a woman resembling her grandmother, eyes hollow with despair. The whispers intensified, now a cacophony, each one pleading for release. Frozen in fear, Sarah felt a sudden gust of wind. The attic window flung open, sending her tumbling backward. The music box rattled violently. In that moment, a figure emerged, a specter of the woman from the portrait, her face twisted in rage and sorrow. "You woke me," she screamed. The melody resumed, but this time it was a dirge, drowning out Sarah's screams, sealing her fate as the next keeper of the cursed tune. In the village of Eldergrove, a thick, shimmering mist rolled in one fateful evening, swallowing homes and streets in its eerie embrace. The villagers, accustomed to its whispers, dared not venture outside. But as dusk fell, a group of children, drawn by a strange allure, crept into the fog. They giggled, unaware of the shadows lurking beneath. As they wandered deeper, the laughter faded, replaced by a soft, haunting melody that seemed to beckon them onward. Suddenly, the mist parted, revealing an ancient well. Its stones, slick with moisture, glistened under the faint light. One child, a girl named Clara, felt an inexplicable urge to peer inside. The moment she leaned over, the melody intensified, transforming into anguished cries. Startled, her friends rushed to her side, but the well had begun to pulsate, the fog swirling faster around them. As they stumbled back, Clara's eyes widened in horror. From the depths, ghostly figures emerged, their faces twisted in despair. They were the lost villagers, trapped for generations, their secrets now laid bare. The children screamed, but the mist thickened, sealing their fate. Eldergrove would never forget that night, where the past clawed its way back, forever entwined with the living. The night was still, as Clara knelt before the weathered tombstone, her breath visible in the chill. It had been years since she visited her grandmother's grave, but the locals whispered of strange happenings in the cemetery. They said it was haunted, cursed even, but Clara dismissed those tales as mere folklore. Tonight was different. She had come to perform the last rites, to seek closure. As she recited the words, an unnerving wind swept through the trees, rustling the leaves like whispers. Suddenly, she felt a presence, cold and watching. The air thickened and her heart raced. Clara glanced up, startled to see shadows shifting among the graves, figures cloaked in darkness, with hollow eyes fixed on her. Panic surged within her. She hurried to finish the rites, but the shadows drew closer, their outlines now distinct. A voice, raspy and echoing, called her name. "You shouldn't have come here," it warned. Clara's hands trembled as she completed the incantation, but it felt futile. The last words echoed, and the shadows lunged, pulling her into the earth. As silence fell, the grave stood unmarked, yet a new figure loomed, waiting for the next visit, for the next last rites. The Carters moved into the old farmhouse on Willow Lane, enchanted by its rustic charm. The neighbors avoided discussing its history, offering only one warning: keep the barn locked at night. At first, life was peaceful, but one evening, a faint light appeared in the barn, a lantern flickering in the darkness. John Carter went to investigate and found the barn door ajar. Inside, the lantern hung from a beam, swinging gently. Beneath it, a mound of freshly turned dirt caught his eye, though nothing seemed out of place. The next night, the lantern returned, swaying violently. Footprints led from the barn to the woods, but no one had been there. Soon, whispers began at night, faint but clear. "Leave." Their daughter, Sarah, started sleepwalking, always toward the barn. One stormy night, she disappeared. They found her inside, digging frantically at the dirt pile with her bare hands. When they pulled her away, she whispered, "He's waiting." Beneath the dirt, they uncovered a rotted wooden box containing human bones and a rusted lantern. The whispers stopped briefly, but shadows began creeping into the house. By dawn, the Carters fled the farmhouse, abandoning everything. That night, the lantern's glow returned, patiently waiting for its next visitors. The Bennett family was ecstatic to move into their newly renovated Victorian home. It had charm, space, and just enough creaks in the floorboards to feel nostalgic. Among the rooms was a locked door at the end of the upstairs hallway. The realtor claimed it was a storage room with no key. Curiosity grew. Weeks passed, and strange noises started coming from behind the door. Soft scratching, faint whispers, and sometimes what sounded like a child laughing. Convinced it was just an animal trapped inside, the Bennetts hired a locksmith. When the door creaked open, they found a small, dusty bedroom. Toys were scattered on the floor, and the wallpaper was peeling, revealing a name etched repeatedly beneath it: Lila. Their daughter Emily grew obsessed with the room, spending hours talking to someone they couldn't see. She insisted Lila was her new friend. At first, they dismissed it as imagination, but when Emily began waking with scratches on her arms, they grew concerned. One night, a loud crash from the locked room jolted them awake. Rushing inside, they found Emily sitting in the dark, smiling. "Lila says you can stay," she whispered. Behind her, the wallpaper peeled away, revealing hundreds of names scratched into the walls. The last name was Bennett. The door slammed shut, and no one heard from the family again. Weeks later, a new family toured the house. The realtor smiled and gestured at the locked door. "Just a storage room," she said. In the dim light of her attic, Sarah discovered an ornate, locked box, its surface etched with intricate symbols that seemed to writhe under her gaze. The key was nowhere in sight, yet a whispering urge gripped her heart. She could feel a presence, an awareness that something was waiting just beneath the surface. Ignoring her better judgment, she pried it open with a crowbar, the metal screeching in protest. As the lid creaked ajar, an icy gust swept through the room, snuffing out her lantern and plunging her into darkness. A rush of shadows coiled around her ankles, seeping from the box, forming grotesque shapes that danced menacingly. Panic surged within her. The air became thick with a suffocating dread. Then, from the depths of the box, a voice croaked, low and raspy. "You've let me out." Heart pounding, she stumbled backward, the realization dawning. The box contained not treasure, but a malevolence she had unleashed. The shadows lunged, coiling tightly around her, and in a twisted final moment, her scream echoed, swallowed by the consuming dark. The box slammed shut, waiting, once again, for the next curious soul. Late at night, Sarah's phone rang, slicing through the silence of her empty apartment. It was a number she didn't recognize. The screen lit up with a name that sent a shiver down her spine. Her own. Hesitating, she answered. "Hello." A breathy silence lingered before a voice, deep and unsettling, whispered through the receiver. "Are you alone?" Panic surged through her veins. She slammed the phone down, her heart thundering. It couldn't be her own voice. It was impossible, yet the phone rang again. Against her instincts, she picked up. "What do you want?" she demanded. The voice chuckled darkly, the sound echoing in her mind. "You invited me in the last time, remember?" Memories flooded her. An old, dusty mirror she found at a yard sale, its surface warped and strange. She had laughed at the odd reflections it cast. "You're not real," she shouted, but the laughter only grew louder. Shadows twisted in the corners of her vision, darkening the room. The voice leaned closer, a hiss now. "But you called me first. Now I'm coming for you." The temperature dropped, her breath visible in icy puffs. With a final flicker, the lights went out, leaving her in the suffocating dark. The call ended, but the laughter remained, echoing endlessly. When Marie inherited her grandmother's old camera, she discovered a peculiar photograph hidden in the back of the dusty case. It depicted a hauntingly beautiful landscape bathed in twilight, yet something felt off. As she examined the image more closely, she felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Every night, the photograph would change, revealing something darker and more sinister. On the first night, a shadowy figure appeared in the corner, barely visible but unmistakably watching. The second night, the figure grew larger, its grotesque face emerging from the darkness. By the third night, twisted trees surrounded the figure, their gnarled branches reaching out like claws. Each morning, Marie awoke to a new horror. She tried to destroy the photograph, but it always reappeared, as if it had a will of its own. On the fourth night, the figure stepped out from the shadows entirely, its eyes locked onto hers. Heart racing, Marie realized the horrifying truth. The photograph wasn't merely changing, it was a countdown. As she trembled in fear, the creature whispered her name. The camera clicked, capturing her final moment before darkness consumed her. The next day, a new photograph emerged. This time it was of Marie, smiling, with the figure lurking behind her. Emma's birthday began with excitement, her friends surrounding her as she tore open presents. Among the colorful wrapping was a small porcelain doll with glassy eyes that seemed to follow her every move. Initially charmed, Emma soon found the doll unsettling. Its gaze felt too intense, almost alive. She named her Clara and placed her on the shelf where Clara could oversee the room. That night, Emma awoke to a soft thudding sound. The doll had shifted a few inches on the shelf, its head turned slightly as if watching her sleep. Dismissing it as a trick of the light, she fell back asleep. But the thumping returned each night, growing louder, an insistent reminder of the eyes that seemed to know her secrets. One evening, she caught a glimpse of Clara's reflection in the glass. The doll's smile appeared wider, almost mocking. Fear gnawed at Emma, yet she couldn't bring herself to part with Clara. On the final night, she woke to find Clara sitting on her bed, eyes wide and empty. In a panic, Emma grabbed the doll, throwing it into the closet. The next morning, she discovered her parents were gone, leaving nothing but a note saying they could no longer watch her. Clara was now free, her watchful eyes finally without human restraint. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, the Thompsons were the first to go. One morning, Sarah noticed their house eerily dark, the lawn unkempt. Days passed, and still no sign of them. Whispers among the neighbors grew. They just packed up and left, some said, but Sarah felt an unsettling dread. She approached their house, glancing through the grimy windows. Inside, furniture was untouched, a plate of food still on the table, rotting. She turned to leave, but a chill ran down her spine. A faint whisper echoed from the shadows, calling her name. Sarah. It beckoned, soft and sinister. Heart racing, she rushed home, locking the door behind her. A week later, the Millers vanished too. Then the Johnsons. The town became a ghost, haunted by the absence of its residents. The whispers grew louder each night, filling Sarah's dreams with terror. Desperate, she reached out to the last few neighbors, but they all looked at her with vacant eyes as if they'd already departed. One night, she awoke to find her front door slightly ajar. The whispers beckoned her again, now a chorus. She stepped outside, and in that moment she understood she was next. As she vanished into the night, her house remained, waiting for the next lost soul. Lena inherited her grandmother's old house, a crumbling relic in a forgotten part of town. As she stepped inside, the air felt thick and heavy, laden with lingering memories. The walls whispered softly, a constant murmur that seemed to weave through the very fabric of the house. At first, she dismissed it as the sound of the wind, but as night descended, the whispers grew clearer, forming words she couldn't quite catch. Curiosity turned to dread when she began to hear her name, drawn out in a breathy, pleading tone. Lena, it beckoned, echoing through the dimly lit rooms. She followed the sound, heart racing, to a locked door at the end of a narrow hallway. The whispers escalated into frantic cries. With trembling hands, she forced the door open, revealing a dusty nursery filled with forgotten toys. The air turned icy, and the whispers stopped abruptly. In the silence, she spotted a small figure in the corner. A girl, pale and hollow-eyed, stared back at her. "Help me," she rasped. Lena reached out, but as her fingers brushed the girl's hand, the figure vanished, leaving only a fading whisper. "You should never have come here." The walls resumed their murmurs, now laughing, as Lena realized she was never truly alone. As night fell, the old library transformed into a labyrinth of shadows. Margaret, the lone librarian, loved the scent of aged paper and the quiet comfort of the stacks. But tonight, a disquieting chill crept through the aisles. She turned a page in her book, but the silence was soon shattered by the unmistakable sound of books sliding off the shelves. Heart racing, she glanced around, convinced it was just her imagination playing tricks. Yet, the air thickened, and the lights flickered ominously. With trepidation, she ventured deeper into the stacks, each step echoing in the stillness. The books seemed to whisper secrets she couldn't comprehend. An unsettling sensation gripped her as she noticed volumes rearranged, titles she never placed there. Suddenly, a heavy thud behind her made her spin around. Nothing was there, just the oppressive darkness. But when she turned back, the books were in disarray again, forming a clear path towards a forgotten corner of the library. Curiosity outweighed fear, and Margaret followed. She stumbled upon an ancient tome, open to a page depicting a shadowy figure. Her blood ran cold as she felt cold breath on her neck, realizing too late that she was never alone in the library. The Wright family was excited to move into their new home, nestled in the quiet hills. The house on Hollow Ridge was everything they wanted: spacious, secluded, and surrounded by nature. But from the moment they arrived, a sense of unease settled over them. The neighborhood was strangely still. The other houses were pristine, but not a soul was ever seen. No one walked their dogs, mowed their lawns, or even waved from the windows. The Wrights assumed it was just a peaceful area, but the silence quickly became oppressive. Days passed and the stillness continued. One evening, as dusk settled, the family noticed an old lantern glowing faintly in the window of the house next door. Intrigued, they walked over. The door creaked open, and they stepped inside. The house was perfectly maintained but cold, as if abandoned for years. A feeling of dread washed over them as they moved deeper into the house, drawn toward the basement. They opened the door and descended into the darkness, only to find an empty room with a single wooden chair in the center. On the walls were countless portraits, but each face had been scratched out, leaving only blank eyes staring back at them. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. A whisper echoed from the shadows, "You're home now." The Wrights turned to flee, but their own faces were now among the portraits on the walls. Hollow Ridge had claimed them, just as it had claimed the others before them. The Tanners had always dreamed of a quiet life, so when they found a charming cottage on Ashwood Lane, they were thrilled. The street was lined with tall trees, and the houses seemed to glow warmly under the setting sun. But the moment they moved in, something felt wrong. The neighbors' homes looked perfect, yet no one ever appeared outside. The street was always silent, with not a sound to be heard, not even the rustle of leaves in the breeze. The Tanners assumed it was just a peaceful area, but as days went by, their unease grew. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the Tanners noticed a light flickering in the house across the street. They walked over, drawn by curiosity, and found the front door slightly ajar. Stepping inside, they felt an immediate coldness, as if the house itself was holding its breath. The living room was meticulously clean, but it felt like no one had lived there for years. The only sound was the faint ticking of a clock, its hands frozen in time. As they explored, they found a door leading to the basement. The stairs creaked underfoot as they descended. In the basement, they found a small, dimly lit room with a single chair in the center. Scattered around it were old, faded photographs, each